Hello, welcome to the 2021 Winter Ag Workshop Series. I'm Cassidy, I'll be your host for today. So today we are joined by Kelsey Porter from the Food Trust, and she will be talking about the Pennsylvania Farm to School program. First, we have a couple housekeeping things. If you have not done the pre-test, please do that. It helps us see how much you learn and what you get out of this. The link for that is in the chat box. We cannot see or hear you. Your video and audio are off. If you need to communicate, there is a chat box. There's two options on the little drop down. You can talk to the panelists, which are the people behind the scenes, or if you want to talk to everyone, say to answer a poll, please make sure you choose to send to all attendees. There's also a Q&A box. During the session, we'll take a couple breaks to answer some questions. If you have those, please put them in there and then Kelsey can answer them at some point. Also, please be respectful. Everything is public. Just keep that in mind. So with that, let's welcome Kelsey Porter.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? I assume so. We did a test. Good. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Cassidy, for going over some of that housekeeping and for welcoming me. And thank you so much to both Cassidy and Charlene for giving me the chance to present this webinar today. I'm really excited to do so. And I also want to say thank you so much to all of you participants for making the time to learn about Farm to School. I know this school year has been absolutely challenging and crazy. So thank you for carving out the time here, and thank you certainly too for all of the work you do on a day-to-day basis. I think the pandemic has really highlighted just how critical the work that is done in school communities is. So give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. And put my presentation into presentation mode. And get it going from the beginning. And hopefully everyone can see the title page of the presentation. But if there are any issues, Cassidy, at any time, please feel free to unmute yourself and alert me to those issues. But hopefully you're seeing the title slide here. And today I will be talking about Farm to School and sharing some essential information and resources with you. So I quickly want to introduce myself and the organization I work for, the Food Trust. And I would also love to see a little bit through some polls, some more information about all of you as well. So my name again is Kelsey Porter, and I work at a Philadelphia-based nonprofit called the Food Trust. And we are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1992, working to ensure everyone has access to healthy food and the information to make healthy decisions. And we take a comprehensive approach to this work by focusing on incentivizing the development of grocery stores in underserved areas by working with corner stores and small stores. We have a farmers market program here in southeastern Pennsylvania where we operate about 20 farmers markets. And then we also do a lot of nutrition education work in schools, in preschools, and in some adult settings too, such as food pantries and at faith-based organizations, things of that nature. And that work is more place-based. Right here in southeastern Pennsylvania, we work in the school district of Philadelphia and a couple of surrounding districts. But we also do some work that is statewide in scope. And I specifically work on farm to school. And one of the things I'm working on is coordinating a Pennsylvania farm to school network, which I am looking forward to telling you more about in the presentation later on. And me personally too, I'll quickly say I was born in southeastern Pennsylvania. I went to college in Philadelphia. When I graduated college, I worked on vegetable farms in the Lehigh Valley, and I've been now working at the Food Trust for about eight years. And I love gardening. I love cooking. I love food and agriculture, and I love farm to school. And so that's just a quick note about me. But I would love to learn a little bit more about you. I know you had to fill in some information when you registered for this webinar, but I would love to ask some of those similar questions, where you're from in Pennsylvania, what grade you're teaching, and I would love for all of the participants to be able to see that information as well. So I'm going to ask Cassidy to launch a couple of polls for us. And if, as you're reading the polls, none of these things describe you, you can go ahead and enter an answer in the chat box too. Okay, so it's looking like we have a number of middle and high school teachers, some elementary school teachers, and there's preschool teacher in there, and some folks from nonprofit organizations that are like me, working at support organizations. Okay, so thank you for that. Appreciate that. And then the next question I have for you is where in Pennsylvania you are from. Okay, and it looks like we have a pretty evenly distributed mix here. I think we have perhaps the most participants from Northwest Pennsylvania and North Central or Central Pennsylvania, but a really great mix, which is wonderful to see. Okay, so last one. So I wanted to ask what your level of familiarity with the phrases farm to school and farm to early care and education is. Hopefully there will be something for everyone in this presentation, for those that are very familiar already and for those that might be less familiar with those specific phrases. And again, it looks like we have a mix. So thank you so much for doing those polls. I love to know a little bit more about who I'm speaking to, and since I can't see you, this is really helpful. And Cassidy, did anything come through the chat that we should highlight?
We have some other occupations: career pathways coordinator, a homeschool mom with a certificate, someone starting a micro school with a gardening composting after school program, starting a farm that will involve pre-K, pre-K to 12 at their school. And we have an agriculture in the classroom state contact.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cassidy, and thank you everyone for participating in those questions. So we'll close that. And oh man, I think I accidentally paused my screen sharing and I'm resuming it. Okay, so we'll move on then, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I plan to cover in today's session. So I will talk about the phrase farm to school to start and describe what we're referring to there. And then I'll go over information and resources that are available at the national level and information and resources that are available at the state level. And I'll close with some ways for you to engage and leave you with some potential action items. So to start, we'll dig into farm to school, what that phrase means, what it includes, what we're referring to when we say that. And I'll also just note that this picture is from Sharon, Pennsylvania, an early childhood education site out there that's run by Cheryl Moss, who you see front and center in the photo there. I've tried to use Pennsylvania photos throughout the presentation, so I'll make a note of those as I go. So farm to school, as you might imagine, and some of you might already be very well familiar with, as indicated in the poll, is all about connecting children to local agriculture. So it's a pretty broad term. It's an umbrella term that includes a wide range of activities. But generally, we are talking about three core elements. And those three core elements of farm to school you see in this graphic. They are procurement, so the purchasing of local and regional products for school meal programs like the National School Lunch Program, school gardens, and then education, food and agriculture education, specifically education that is experiential in nature, farm field trips being a great example. So it's not that farm to school, that every activity under that umbrella term is a brand new thing. It's certainly not. There are food service directors who have kept up connections with their local farmers and have continued to buy local products for their school meal programs. And certainly we have some very robust agriculture education work that happens in our state that many of you are likely involved in. But in many communities over the past few decades, we have lost a little bit of our connection to local agriculture. I know, I myself grew up in a densely populated area. My parents didn't grow any of their own food, and I didn't always have a really robust knowledge of Pennsylvania agriculture. And certainly I know, the children that we work with in our school communities in Philadelphia, they don't always know what foods are in season when, and they don't always have access to them in their school meal programs or otherwise. So farm to school is really about kind of rebuilding those connections and thinking holistically too about the different ways that children can be engaged with agriculture and local foods. So that is the definition there. And those three core elements, again, are procurement and purchasing of local products for school meal programs, school gardens, and food and agriculture education. So I'm going to dive briefly into these three components a little bit further. And I'm going to start with procurement. And I want to share too that procurement, we are frequently talking about the National School Lunch Program, but that's not all we're talking about. We are talking about all child nutrition program settings and all child nutrition programs and how local foods can be purchased for those programs. So in the school setting, indeed, we have the National School Lunch Program. We also have the National School Breakfast Program, and there are a few others that are associated with schools. But then we also have child nutrition programs for the preschool setting. Maybe our preschool teacher on the line is aware of this one, but there's the child and adult care food program for early childhood education sites. And then there's also the summer food service program that many of you, I'm sure, are aware of, but that bridges the gap between the school years. And also, when we're talking about farm to school and local food purchasing, conveniently happens when our growing season is most abundant. So those are the child nutrition programs that we are referring to when we're thinking about procurement. And I won't dive in too deeply to this topic, although I will share some resources for anyone who may want to learn more. But food service, school food service, is a pretty challenging field, really, because the margins are quite tight, and sometimes it can be an underappreciated um, a profession, and a lot of the work happens kind of behind the scenes, and the public doesn't always, have an understanding of those details naturally, because it is happening behind the scenes. And some of you may know this, but for anyone coming from a support organization or less familiar with food service, I will quickly highlight too that schools and sites currently get just over $3 per meal um, to spend as their budget. So it is a tight budget. And then of course, that meal includes foods from all of the food groups. So I think schools and sites might be one of the only places, if not the only places, that you could get a nutritionally really robust meal for the price of just about $3. But what's more here is that $3 also has to cover the labor, the time of our lunch ladies and gentlemen, and it also has to cover the utilities, the equipment in the kitchen, the electricity bill. So just a little bit of background information on what's happening in school food service. It's not always easy to be incorporating those local foods, but I'm happy to report that there are many food service directors who are finding ways to do so, and maybe there are some of those folks at your schools, and if not, there are wonderful examples to draw on. It definitely can be done. And I'll also just note that we're talking about all food groups when we're talking about farm to school. We do love to focus sometimes on fruits and vegetables because it's an easy entry point, like cherry tomatoes, for example, that you see on the screen, are apples. They are straightforward products that don't require a lot of prep, and we have an abundance of fruit and vegetables in Pennsylvania. So talking about all food groups. And one last thing before I move on here that I want to mention is local is up to the school district to define. So USDA and other entities don't have one specific definition for local foods, and it varies from place to place. So, in Philadelphia, where I am, if our schools are purchasing blueberries from New Jersey, then that is quite local. But in other places, it might make sense to be focusing on just Pennsylvania. And either way, I think Pennsylvania agriculture is a wonderful thing to highlight. So that's that. And lastly, I'll just say the photo here was from the School District of Philadelphia. They did what they called PA Preferred Day, where all of the products for the lunch for that day were locally sourced. So it's a little hard to tell in the photo, but it's a grilled cheese sandwich with some fruits and vegetables and a chocolate milk. So that is procurement. For school gardens, I want to emphasize that we are talking about all types of gardens. And I know that some schools, and maybe some schools that you work at or work that you lead, includes full-blown student farms. And actually, I'll take this opportunity really quickly to plug a school in my neighborhood, which is W.B. Saul Agricultural High School, which is a magnet school It's actually the largest farm school in the US, and it has the largest FFA chapter in Pennsylvania. So it's a great big farm, full-blown variety of operations, animals, fruit and vegetable production, etc. So that's wonderful. That's kind of taking farm to school above and beyond just the school gardens, but we're also looking at and talking about smaller scale gardening efforts, and even children at an urban preschool, for example, planting seeds in a Dixie cup. We think of that as school garden, and kind of everything in between up to those wonderful student farms that we have in some schools in our state. So I'm not going to dig too much into school gardens today. I will share a couple of resources related to school gardens, but there is another webinar in this series this week called Building Outdoor Learning Opportunities, and that will be tomorrow at 4 p.m., hosted by Diane from PA Friends of Ag Foundation. So I'm registered for that one, and I'm looking forward to it. And so if school gardens is something you're really interested in, I bet you'll get some really great information there. But I'm also always happy to brainstorm about school gardens. I'm a master gardener, and I also especially love when there are connections to the cafeteria for the garden. So lots of great stuff with gardening, but more to come tomorrow at 4. So lastly, experiential education is another component of farm to school. A couple of examples of that would be farm field trips, taste tests, cooking in the classroom with seasonal products, school assemblies where a farmer might come to the school. In the photo here, this is a photo I took in State College a few years ago. There's a local baker who sells products to the school, and he also comes in and does an assembly for the elementary students on grain production and his bakery business. And that also leaves me with another point here too, but that is one theme that's kind of woven throughout is farm to school, and the farm to school movement is all about building community connections. And so I think I started by emphasizing that a farm to school is about children, but it's also about our communities, the small businesses in our communities, our farmers. So there are kind of multiple benefits to farm to school. So that is kind of an overview there. And I'm going to share some resources from the national level, and then I'm going to talk to you more about what we're doing here in Pennsylvania. But I just want to pause to see, Cassidy, if there are any questions there or any comments that came through in the chat or the Q&A.
Just a reminder, if anyone would like to ask a question, there's the Q&A button. We would love to hear. We did have a couple comments. One attendee went to WB Saul and graduated in 2010.
Oh, that's awesome.
And another one received a garden grant from the Food Trust a few years ago to establish a classroom garden.
Oh, that's great to hear. Oh, thank you for popping those comments in the chat, and thank you, Cassidy, for reading them. And if more come through, that would be great. And like Cassidy said, you can also use the Q&A function too. So farm to school at the national level. This photo is from the Farm to Cafeteria Conference, the most recent one that was in Madison, Wisconsin. But I will tell you more about that in a moment. So one key organization that maybe some of you are already aware of, but that I want to highlight is the National Farm to School Network. And the National Farm to School Network is a nonprofit organization that is an information networking and advocacy hub for farm to school. And it launched in 2007, and it has had different structures over the course of its time, but the current structure is there are national staff and an advisory board, and then there are core and supporting partners in every state. So in Pennsylvania, I serve as the core partner, and I have a couple of supporting partners who I work with from the Pennsylvania Departments of Health, Agriculture, and Education, as well as Penn State University. And essentially, we field inquiries that come in through the National Farm to School Network, take calls with people who are interested in farm to school, set people up with a recommended list of resources based on their needs, and just address odds and ends and communicate with folks who express an interest. And then also there's a flow of information from the state level and the national level there too, between the national staff and the core and supporting partners. And then there are, of course, the members. Anyone can be a member. It's free, and you get access to some really robust, excellent newsletters that they put out, and opportunities to engage in various events. And so if you're not familiar, I would definitely recommend visiting the Farm to School website. There's an excellent database of resources on the Farm to School website that cover all three elements of farm to school: school gardening, education, and procurement. And you can break it down by setting, by topic, to search through that database. So if you are starting a farm at your school and you have a question about like what your starting budget for your school garden should be, or your school farm, you can kind of browse through, click the topic fundraising and click the topic garden, and see what comes through. And there are many dozens of resources there. It might not meet all of your needs, but it will definitely be a good place to do a check there, check through their resources. NFSN also does virtual and in-person events. So they do a conference every other year that I have a photo of there, the Farm to Cafeteria Conference. Usually it's over the course of a couple of days. It rotates in location. There are great field trips that are involved, inspiring presentations. The food is always phenomenal. It's a really wonderful event. It's currently a little on hold with COVID, but hopefully next year they'll be back on schedule with that. And in the meantime, there are a number of virtual events, webinars and presentations, things like that. And so lastly, another core function of the National Farm to School Network is policy advocacy. And they're engaged in a lot of policy advocacy efforts. I won't go through them in great detail, but they have a policy advocacy handbook on their website. It's one of their key resources that goes over what policy opportunities there are for farm to school, what's on the books in other states, what's gaining traction, what are the opportunities. So lots of ways to get involved with policy advocacy if that's of interest to you. And speaking of policy advocacy, one of the first efforts that NFSN was engaged in related to policy advocacy was the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, which passed in 2010. So some of you may remember that, some of you may be familiar with that. It was a robust piece of legislation that had many components, and one of the things it did was update the meal patterns for the National School Lunch Program and other federal child nutrition programs, increase the reimbursement rate. A lot of kind of foundational school food measures happened through that act. But what I want to highlight, which is really important for the farm to school movement, is that the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act set up the Office of Community Food Systems. So that's under the Food and Nutrition Service at USDA. And the Office of Community Food Systems really works on farm to school. That is what OCFS does. They do a great job, and it's so wonderful to have the support of the federal government in farm to school efforts. So there's a national staff, and there are staff people in each regional office. in Pennsylvania, we are part of the Mid-Atlantic region, so the Marrow office covers our needs. But it was a very exciting development for Farm to School, and has been very impactful. Some of the things the office does is provide grant funds. So some of you may already be aware of this. We might have some Farm to School grantees on the line here, but for years this has been a recurring grant opportunity for Farm to School, for school gardens, agriculture education, and for kitchen initiatives too, although not specifically for the purchase of products for the meal programs. But other than that, a pretty wide variety of funding uses for schools, nonprofits, pretty wide variety of eligible entities as well. And the grants go up to $100,000. They're usually different tracks. So it's a wonderful thing to have. And there's been great traction with this funding stream. It has been recurring, and the amount of money allocated by the federal government has increased over time. So definitely recommend you check out this funding stream. But the Office of Community Food Systems also does training and technical assistance. And they have a nice set of resources as well that I would recommend you check out. It's not as much of a database, but they have highlighted a few key resources, some of which are original resources. They have an excellent fact sheet series that is full of 1 and 2 pagers about a variety of different topics, like how cooperative extension can support Farm to School, or facts about local food and school meals that give you a great overview of different topics. So the fact sheet series is available, as well as some other key resources and a lot more than I'm sure you would ever want to know about procurement, which does make sense since USDA oversees federal child nutrition programs and procurement. But another great website to visit to see if there are any resources that might be relevant to you as you work on Farm to School in your communities. And one last thing I'll say about USDA is they also created the USDA Farm to School census. And so far, there's been one published Farm to School census in which every district in the country was asked about their farm to school activities, such as their purchasing of local products, the percentage of their budgets that are spent on local agricultural products, but then also around educational efforts too, like do they do farm field trips? Do they have school gardens? So it's really cool. You can look up, your own school district or neighboring school districts to see what's on the books, but it's a little bit out of date. What's published is, I believe, from the 2013-2014 school year, and they just collected data in 2019. So we should get an updated data set in 2021. So fingers crossed. I don't think we have an exact date for that yet, but it should be coming. So before I move on to talking about what's kind of going on at the state level, I wanted to highlight a couple of educational resources that I recommend, that I have found through USDA and NFSN that I've used in the schools that I work with, or during the food trust programs. Some of you, I'm sure, have additional ideas or resources that you might recommend. I'd love if you might drop them in the chat. That would be great to see. But since you all are educators, I wanted to make sure to highlight some of the best educational resources that are out there for Farm to School. And one thing that I absolutely recommend and have used myself is the curricula from Team Nutrition, which is from USDA, from FNS, the same federal agency as Office of Community Food Systems. But there are 5 curricula that span in different age groups and have a focus on local agriculture and gardening. So we have Grow It, Try It, Like It for preschool, and then moving up through the grades, Great Garden Detective, Dig In, really wonderful curricula. They're created by USDA, they're evidence-based, and they're wonderful to use as, a full curricula in its entirety. But they're also just great to flip through for inspiration too, maybe take an activity here or there, or do one of the modules. For example, we at the Food Trust have used the curricula in both ways, in more formal ways and less formal ways, and definitely recommend it. It's also available for free, and you can get hard copies as well for free, too. Although, everything being virtual right now, not really sure what the status is, but you can request those hard copy materials to be sent to you, which is really nice to take a break from the screen and look through some tactile materials there. I also want to highlight National Ag in the Classroom, of course. I know we have a state contact who is participating on the webinar today. I know certainly Charlene and PA Friends of Agriculture Foundation, very involved with Ag in the Classroom, but an excellent matrix of resources. Love that that matrix is linked by standards, learning standards, and grade level. And I'm sure this is a resource that many of you are already aware of, but I just thought I would be totally remiss to not mention it. And then lastly, I unfortunately wasn't able to pull up the link for this resource. It was down, and I sincerely hope they get it back up and running. But another recommendation for educational resources is My Plate, My State, which there's resources, materials for every state, including Pennsylvania. And there are activity sheets and different ideas for a little less formal engagement, but I have really enjoyed using these materials at our farmers markets to entertain kids while their parents are shopping. But I think there's a pretty wide range of age groups that could be engaged with these activities. And it's really about thinking about what agricultural products your state produces and how those products can be used to create, healthy, nutritious, delicious meals that align with My Plate. So those are a couple of the recommendations that I have. And yes, eager to talk to you about farm to school at the state level as well, but want to pause here, Cassidy, to see if any other questions or comments have come through.
We did have another attendee who said they used to teach at Saul, so that was interesting. And also some interest in those resources and where to find them. And we will send out those links again tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Sorry, my dog's barking. I hope that's not too loud in the background there. I apologize if it is. But thank you for those comments. And I think we're doing pretty good on time here. This is one of the last kind of sections of the presentation that I have for you, but I'm really excited to share about some of the work that we're doing on the state level to advance farm to school. So actually, I'm going to stick to the more visual slide first to share a little background information. So at the Food Trust, we have been kind of loosely coordinating a leadership team of farm to school folks who have a statewide lens. Like I mentioned, the supporting partners who we work with through NFSN at our state agencies, but we've broadened that group a little bit to convene on a monthly basis to really look at creating some state level programs and policies for farm to school. There are a lot of great resources that exist through the national organizations and agencies that I've mentioned, but what's relevant in California might not be so relevant in Pennsylvania, and Farm to School really is place based. So we have been working to be coordinated here in Pennsylvania around programs and policies. And so I want to share, hopefully not too much background, but a little bit more background on some of our strategic planning that we have been engaged with, and some of the opportunities that we have kind of on the horizon. Um, so again, currently the Pennsylvania Farm to School Network is a leadership team. There are about a dozen organizations represented from different state agencies and from different nonprofit organizations and associations. It is a cross-sectoral group. And at first we began meeting just so we didn't duplicate resources. But we have found that there's a lot of potential for collaboration, and we are hoping to expand our farm to school leadership team and really become more of a farm to school network that engages a wide variety of folks across Pennsylvania. So in fall of 2020, we did some strategic planning facilitated by the National Farm to School Network and came together around a mission and a vision, which I don't think will be surprising here given the backgrounds I have shared. But our vision is that every child in Pennsylvania is meaningfully connected to and nourished by thriving local food systems. And our mission is to use our collective resources from the different state agencies and nonprofits to work on farm to school and farm to early care and education initiatives that create these opportunities for children across Pennsylvania to grow, to learn about, and to enjoy eating local foods, to increase market opportunities for Pennsylvania producers, and to grow community connections. So we kind of coalesced around some of those big picture goals. And I want to share too some of the projects that we have been collaborating on to date, and then I will move more into what we have planned. But we have been meeting more informally since 2017, and one of the key things we've worked on together is the Pennsylvania Farm to School Grant Program. And the Pennsylvania Farm to School Grant Program is administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. It's part of the Pennsylvania Farm Bill. There are other grant programs within the Pennsylvania Farm Bill, such as the Youth and Ag Grant Program and other programs that some of you may be aware of. But the Pennsylvania Farm to School Grant Program is one that our Pennsylvania Farm to School Network has really focused on and gotten to have some input on. So those awards can go up to $15,000. So they're not as large as the USDA Farm to School grants, but they're still significant. It's a still significant amount of fund, I think. I hope you agree. And the paperwork burden is much, and administration is much lower than USDA. And the pool obviously is smaller since it's open to grantees within Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a complementary opportunity, and it covers all elements of farm to school. And one thing that we were really hoping for and pushing for is for these funds to actually be able to support the purchasing of local Pennsylvania agricultural products for school meal programs, which the USDA Farm to School grant doesn't allow for the routine purchase of products for school meal programs to be covered through their grant. So really happy that that is an allowable expense, but it also covers elements of farm to school, like school gardens and educational efforts. So the first round of applications opened last year just before COVID hit. So some kind of funny timing there, and applications should be opening up again soon. The Pennsylvania Farm to School Network as a group has collaborated on this, but it's really up to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture to make the final decisions and to administer the program. But Members of the group in the past were able to participate in the scoring of the grant applications and also, advocate for expanding eligibility and things of that nature. So that was one thing we have been working on together as a group so far, and hopefully we'll get to continue working on in the future. Um, Another example of a collaboration that we have going through the Pennsylvania Farm to School Network is Harvest of the Month. So Harvest of the Month, some of you may be familiar with, but it's essentially a promotional campaign in which one agricultural product is highlighted every month. And in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Department of Education took the lead on creating a Harvest of the Month program. The materials that are available currently are all food service oriented, so a lot of posters and tips for food service directors to be buying these products. But it has been a point of collaboration that other members of the Pennsylvania Farm to School Network have been able to build on. So the Food Trust will be creating educational materials for Harvest of the Month to complement Harvest of the Month. That can be done in the classroom or even in the cafeteria, but bringing that education component in. And Department of Health has created some funding and training opportunities to help specific preschools and schools get their Harvest of the Month programs off the ground. So that's another example of work we've been able to do together. And there are more examples. We are working on a summit, which will hopefully be an in-person conference that will happen in 2022, and a number of different things. But with our time, I just wanted to highlight a couple of examples of the ways in which we have worked together so far. But we're really aiming to engage a broader group of people in this work, and we have a few opportunities that I wanted to share with you. We have a website that will be launching in May 2021, and this will be a one-stop shop for Pennsylvania Farm to School for Pennsylvania specific resources. And we also have some opportunities coming up for us to get broader input on our strategic plan. And so we have a webinar that will be next week on Thursday, February 18th. It will go over more background information than I provided. Specifically, we'll go over who exactly has been part of the Pennsylvania Farm to School Network to date, what is the structure of the network, and what are the plans for the network going forward. We'll introduce a draft strategic plan, and then our hope is to have small group discussions that are organized by sector to get real input on the strategic plan and what would really be helpful to folks in Pennsylvania. So we have a food service group that will be doing, a farmer supplier group that will be doing, and then an educator group, as well as a support services and nonprofit group. So more of that will be explained on the introductory webinar, but I wanted to put that opportunity on your radar. We are also planning to launch working groups at, beginning late spring 2021. And so they will be broken down a few different categories, but join the webinar to learn more about the plans there. And also we will always be sending out information on our newsletter too. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And I encourage you to please sign up for it. So I have a link here for the sign up, and also a registration link for the webinar next week. And as some, last thoughts about how to engage, maybe there's something for you to find in some of these databases that I shared or some of these links that I have shared. So I would encourage you to dig into the national level resources, and stay tuned for when our website is developed and we have the state level resources. Consider applying for a Pennsylvania Farm to School grant. Definitely feel free to get in touch with me if you'd like to have a quick call about anything farm to school related. Um, and also, I would say, too, it's always great to just try something out and have fun, start small. I know this is, a crazy time, but hopefully, um, we will be getting back to normal, and spring is just around the corner, and there will be lots of opportunities to try working on different farm to school initiatives in your schools and your communities. So I think that is all I have, but there's still a couple minutes left in the webinar, and I would be happy to clarify anything that I shared about the work going on in Pennsylvania. Hopefully that was clear, but if not, happy to answer any questions about that or anything else that was shared today. So Cassidy, any questions?
So yes, you can go ahead. Oh, we have what is the link for the webinar on the 18th? So we do have some interest in that.
So Cassidy, you said you would be able to send the slideshow out to participants.
Yep.
So everyone will have the slides and have the links. Okay, great.
Yeah. So we'll just put that link in there and you can definitely get involved. Feel free to add any more questions. We have one, are the grants available to any type of school in PA? So private as well as public?
For the Pennsylvania Farm to School Grant Program, yes, they're open to both public and private schools, and we had a mix in the first round. And they're also open to ECE sites as well.
Very good. Could you tell us about a way that a school has implemented maybe a grant or another portion of the network that you thought was really interesting and worked out really well?
Sure. So, in terms of schools using grant funds, I know in years past, some schools have created their own Harvest of the Month programs using grant funds, and some of our hope through the Pennsylvania Farm to School Network is to create some state level resources so individual districts don't necessarily have to recreate the wheel. But that was also an excellent foundation for us to tap into. But schools have used both USDA Farm to School grants and Pennsylvania Farm to School grants to do really wonderful things. In Philadelphia, the school district of Philadelphia had a USDA Farm to School grant, and they explored purchasing products in the summer and flash freezing them or processing them in the summer for use later in the school year. Such as blueberries were one really successful example. So they got to kind of explore that through a grant. For the Pennsylvania Farm to School grant program, one nearby district to here, Chichester School District, they applied for a grant. They did some promotions around a PA Preferred Day. I think I mentioned that concept of doing like an all local lunch. And then they also bought indoor garden towers for 5 of their classrooms, which is a great option if there is less outdoor space available. So the idea was for some of the herbs and greens to be used for taste tests and even in the cafeteria. But cafeteria operations and school operations are a little bit wonky, so that's a bit paused. But I'm confident it will continue. So those are a couple of examples of the uses of the grant program. And what was the last what was the last part of the question there, Cassidy? I missed something, I think.
Um, I think that was it. Just about how, you know, how they implemented them and how it worked out. I think
Great.
that was good. We have another one. Does it include in-home programs for childcare or school with after-school programs? Maybe like mini grants? They are trying to increase school and child garden program awareness.
So out of school or after school would be allowable for USDA Farm to School grants and Pennsylvania Farm to School grants. A home visiting program might not neatly fit for those grant programs, but I would definitely encourage whoever asked that question to shoot me an email, and I would be happy to send maybe some tailored recommendations of funds that might be a better fit, because there are different options out there.
Very helpful. We have another one. Have you ever had a family and consumer science teacher participate in grants or farm to school programs?
Yes, definitely. I will say that family and consumer science teachers, it's like the perfect fit for farm to school, right? And so I think it makes perfect sense for family and consumer science programs to be applying for this funding. One example I have from a past grant program that we did that was not the Pennsylvania Farm to School grant program, but another program that we had a few years ago was in Bald Eagle School District, and their family and consumer science program linked up with their ag education program and did a kind of school gardening effort where the ag education did some of the agricultural and gardening work, and then the family and consumer science program used the products grown. And in this case, they had chickens with laying hens and eggs and different things. So it wasn't just produce, but they used those products in the family and consumer science classroom as part of their curriculum, and did some cooking in the classroom there. But it's a great fit. So I'm glad that was highlighted.
Yeah, that's very interesting and great to be able to use it across different subjects.
Yeah.
Do we have any other final questions? I don't see any, so looks like that might be it. All right. Well, Kelsey, do you have any closing remarks?
Just thank you again so much for inviting me to share this presentation, and I would love so much to connect with the participants through upcoming webinars, and especially the small group discussions where we'll be engaging in conversation too. So I hope to connect with some of you in the future, and thank you so much for attending this webinar. And we're right on time too, which is great.
That was perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing about the network and the ways that everyone can get involved. Definitely very exciting. Everyone who attended, if you could take the post test that is in the chat box, that would be wonderful. And then tomorrow in an email, you will receive a link to a folder that has lots of resources that Kelsey mentioned today. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for School Gardens.
Thank you.
Thank you.